Right, ready?
Go for it.
Hello and welcome to this. It is the EggChasers Rugby Podcast, the podcast about rugby that doesn't take itself or the game too seriously. But to be honest, does anybody in rugby take the game too seriously at the moment?
Well, I was going to say, we try not to take World Rugby, the Six Nations, Summer Nations, disciplinary panels, Premiership Rugby, or indeed anyone running the game too seriously.
We're going to have to change our motto to the podcast that takes the game equally as serious as the authorities that run it.
Exactly.
It doesn't have the same ring to it, but it'd be true, wouldn't it?
Oh dear,
My
oh dear.
goodness me, here we are. I mean, this. I know that this is like the excitement that you used to feel, JB, as a kid waiting for Christmas morning. Is how you've been feeling every waiting for this.
It's incredible, isn't it? I mean, there are some really serious points to be explored here, actually. But it is just incredible that this is the story that dominates the rugby headlines.
And it is, like, I mean, Eddie Jones today gave it some air cover, this story, for a couple of hours.
He did his best.
But he
what
could
did
only
he say about it?
No, not about this, just wearing his Indiana Jones hat, telling the bunch of Aussie journalists at Sydney Airport to uppercut themselves, and that it was the worst interview ever.
I've seen that, actually. I thought you meant he spoke about Farrell.
No.
I honestly wish those journalists gave him what for there. I mean, they're meant to be a sharper wit than that. They just stood there and took it. They just stood there and absolutely took it. And they have every right to go at him. I wish they would have gone at him. I would have.
I know you. You definitely would have.
But, who does he think he is? Like, he's there telling these journalists, don't you question me about my job. Well, first of all, it is literally their job to question them. To question him about his job.
Correct.
And second of all,
also, what's Eddie Jones's job? He is he's got to build an atmosphere in his team going to France that could be successful, and I think today may have been successful in that. And also, he has got to try and one of his jobs. It won't be his direct job, but one of the things he is doing, which he may regard as his job, is to try and raise the profile of Australian rugby. And the fact it's the fourth most popular sport, he did a great job at getting people to talk about it today. I guess in that sense,
yeah, maybe
you could say World Rugby, Six Nations, the three-man Aussie panel have done an amazing job at getting rugby in the headlines, because there's people that probably haven't seen or heard a single story about rugby in months who know about this.
I just wish one of those journalists came up with the retort that they could do at least as good a job with their winning record as Eddie Jones has done since taking over at Australia Rugby.
Yeah.
I mean, I could do it. Yeah. I could match his win percentage tomorrow. Be no problem.
Anyone could.
Yeah.
But we're not here to talk about Eddie Jones.
No, come on.
We're here. So we on Sunday's podcast, we knew that Farrell was going to face a disciplinary panel on Tuesday. That was about all we knew. We all expected his red card to be upheld, and we expected somewhere between, say, a 3 and 6 week ban, depending on how it played out. On Tuesday, a miraculous thing happened. That none of us expected. Almost no one in the game expected. The only voice in the game that really expected it was, other than perhaps Owen Farrell, and perhaps even he didn't really believe it, was Rugby and the Law.
Yeah, fair play.
He was the only credible account that I saw, Ben Cisneros, I think that's right.
Yeah, Cisneros.
Who said there might be sufficient mitigation to take it down from a red card to a yellow card.
Yeah, it's so interesting that, because obviously Ben, well, as the account kind of gives away, is Rugby and the Law. Ben is a solicitor by training.
Yeah.
And so I guess this is exactly what happened. A solicitor looked at this case and then put forward a good argument, and it somehow won. But I think it's worth putting this a little bit into context as to the conversations which were had on Sunday, on Monday, and on Tuesday. Because this is one of the few cases, with the exception of Ben, that everybody in rugby agreed. Like 99%.
Well, so that's an interesting point, because I've spoken to a couple of people So 99% of people that we spoke to who are on WhatsApp and on Twitter, who are, if you're in a WhatsApp group with us or we're viewing you on Twitter, you tend to be pretty engaged in the game.
Yes, this is such an important point.
As it is right now, I've spoken to 2 individuals who both play the game but do not really follow it.
Yep.
They don't watch. They'll watch England in the Six Nations. They don't watch any Premiership stuff. They don't follow it on Twitter or anywhere else. And they were both kind of like, don't see what the fuss is about, didn't really see why it was a red card, understand why the red card's been rescinded.
Yeah. Tim?
Broadly speaking, I agree with you, and I think Phil's made a very good point there. Yeah, I mean, there's everything that led up to Tuesday. I also think there was the conversation was, there was a bit of chuntering, a bit of chatter about how long's the ban going to be, what do you think this means for England, fly half position, etc. But I don't think anyone was nearly as bothered about the whole thing as suddenly they became on Tuesday.
Yes.
The reaction...
Myself included.
I've never known anything like it. And I think there was... Well, no. Do I understand it? I guess I'm trying to understand why there was the intensity of the reaction. But I think the reaction defied all logic. I don't understand how this is quite as big a deal as it is. There's so many different ingredients going into the pot to cause that, but I think it's completely blown out of all proportion.
Yeah, okay. So I think the reaction is very important because I think it kind of plays into what Phil's alluding to there and something which I have also thought, which is it was nailed on red card. So I was speaking to a very well-known journalist this week about this, and it is a nailed on red card for people who are engaged with rugby, and this is a really important point.
That is, I completely agree with that. Yeah. If you followed the precedent that's been set over the last, say, 5 years, and anything to do with the World Rugby High Tackle framework, you've seen other incidents like that, you know it's a red card.
Yeah. And I have sat next to sighting officers at Sale Sharks, right? And this is my theory on how this original decision got made. This is my initial working theory. I've sat next to sighting officers, and sometimes you need to explain to them who the opposition are. They'll know who Sale is, and they'll know some of the players, but they won't even know who Sale are. And you ask them, like, who are you, basically? And you look on the name tag, and it'll be a name that you know. A lot of sighting commissioners are ex-players.
Ex-players.
And you ask them, like, so you're into Premiership? No, not really. What do you do with your time? I just go down to local club. Now, this panel was comprised of a judge. I don't know if the judge has to be a rugby judge, like attends court sessions and, or is he an actual, King's Council? I mean, he's an Australian guy, I get it.
Yeah, he's an SC, but I don't know what that means. That's Australian legal speak.
Yeah, Senator Council, I don't know, I made it up, something like that. An SC, right? So he's somebody, right? And then there's 2 players. Now, if you played in the 90s, but your interaction with the game, particularly the English Premiership, is next to nothing, and you go down to your local club and you sort of watch it like a detached fan does, this probably does not look necessarily like a red card. That's the only thing that I can possibly think of. And then you listen to a compelling argument from a King's Council, which the RFU have hired at great expense when they can't afford anything else, but they've done this. And you go, yeah, okay, we'll let him off. And it's completely contrary to what World Rugby wants and what the engaged fan base think is going to happen. But it probably does chime a lot more, ironically, with the fan base that World Rugby are desperate to engage.
Perhaps, yeah. On that, now, when I watched this, and right up until I read the report that has finally been released, although I think I'm not sure it was meant to be released, and we'll go into that in a little bit, but I've now read the full report. I'm softened, having read the arguments within the context of the report. I've softened a little bit. I actually still think it's a red card, but I think there is more grey than there was when I first saw it.
All right, why don't you tell us about the report then?
So, the report, it was the Six Nations who held this disciplinary.
Now, are they the same as the ERPC?
EPRC? No,
EPRC.
I don't.
Slightly different.
I think they're different. EPRC runs the Tier 2 European. Is it EPRC? But the company, the organisation that runs the Tier 2.
And
there's so much clarity in our sport, isn't there? So much clarity.
I mean, we're fairly engaged. We should know this.
Yeah. Well,
but they've been used interchangeably, those two terms, haven't they, for this disciplinary panel?
Should we know this, though?
Maybe.
I don't think that's pertinent.
No, it's not pertinent.
Although the six, the reason why I think they're different is because the Six Nations is comprised of and owned by the six nations that play in the Six Nations. Therefore, I don't think they are the same as the European rugby.
EPCR Tier 2
I heard it was
all European club rugby. It doesn't really matter. Like Paul says, carry on with the report. Let's not get in the weeds on this.
Yeah. So the Six Nations, who only, it would appear, released the report via email to selected journalists originally, but they only released a statement on the report, not the full report. And indeed, they said that the full report was not going to be released. That report was released by World Rugby today when World Rugby announced that they were going to appeal the decision. So that report, which is not actually the full transcript of the meeting, and it misses a load of evidence, but it's the summary report that runs to 7 pages that contains the arguments of both sides and the logic behind the decision.
Okay.
And it is interesting.
So what are your highlights from this?
So, highlight number 1, which I think is very relevant. There is additional video footage of the incident from different angles and different speeds. Mm-hmm. So we've only seen it from 2 or 3 angles.
Yep.
From none of those angles can you determine whether there is and certainly from the angles that I've seen, I did not believe that there was a significant change of height or dynamic movement.
Not for me.
Now, they go into some length that there isn't, they believe, a change in height, but that E2's interaction with W20 meant that he had a significant dynamic change of movement that led to, without that change of movement, Owen Farrell was in a position to make a legal tackle.
Yep.
And therefore that is why they've overturned that allowed them to apply the mitigation that dynamic change of movement means it can be mitigated.
However, there's one thing which is missing from that, which is Owen Farrell had his arm tucked.
Now, so that is the glaring thing in this report. So, as you will well know, GB and Tim, that the 4th question in the World Rugby head contact process is there any mitigation? And if there is, you can downgrade a yellow card to a penalty or a red card to a yellow card. If there is no mitigation, then you can't. The mitigation is either, let me get this up, line of sight, no. Clear attempt to reduce the tackle height from the tackler, no. Level of control, no. Passive tackler, no. Sudden and significant drop or movement, yes. So they're
maybe.
saying, well,
that's what they're saying.
They actually go through it in some detail. They extend several paragraphs as to why there is.
This is nuts.
From different angles. And so I'm and I've looked back at the footage. You can see why there would be, but I think if we had the spider cam angle, which I presume, or certainly a top-down angle, which I presume they did have, I could see why you'd get that conclusion in the movement. But you're exactly right, JB, that is there any mitigation is caveated by mitigation will not apply for intentional or always illegal acts of foul play.
Agreed.
Now, they actually state, and let me get the exact phrase, because it's right at the end. They state that the player's act of foul play was not intentional or always illegal. So they actually state that doesn't apply. Mm-hmm. However, they do not address in none of the written context that we have received, which is only a summary report of 7 pages versus the full meeting. In none of that do they actually address the fact that Owen Farrell's right arm, which was the arm and shoulder that made tackle, and indeed was always the arm and shoulder that was going to make the tackle regardless of the dynamic movement, was tucked. It was a chicken wing position.
100%.
Therefore, this is the
It'd have been better to hit him clean in the face with a shoulder, wrapping and taking off his head.
So had he have made an attempt to wrap,
You'd get away with this.
I strongly believe that this mitigation is sufficient, even though I've not seen the video evidence, just from reading the description. But because his arm is chicken winged, this will be the point that World Rugby will be wanting to appeal on.
And on that, if I may, firstly, Phil, I love that you're on this pod, because you do such a good job at times like that, brilliantly summarised, and thank you for shedding some light on that. Are we not holding players to unreasonably high standards there? Because
yes, Tim, of course we are.
The kind of catch-22 here, or double jeopardy, whichever way you want to look at it, is the mitigation cannot apply, as you're right, World Rugby will likely argue. The mitigation cannot apply because he was, quote, always illegal, arm in a chicken wing position. But his arm was in a chicken wing position when Tame Basham made contact with him because of the mitigating factors.
Well, no.
It's like an infinity loop that you can't end.
Well, no, because
he couldn't do one without the other. One wouldn't have happened without the other, and he wasn't able to do one because of the other.
I'm not sure I agree with that, because
there's got to be some logic to that, hasn't there? I'm not. There's got to be some logic to what I'm saying.
I can see that as an argument. I'm not certain it's relevant here. I understand it's not relevant by the framework that's laid out. But
but in this actual case, I think I am with you in terms of it. This could be a thing.
Yeah, it could be. But this is, I guess, broadening it out to a bigger point. This is one of those examples which we talk about a lot of the law of unintended consequences. The more you litigate something, the more little caveats and extra detail you put in.
Yeah,
I think we're missing the even bigger point here, which is a red card was issued. This panel should be convening to see how long the ban is. And if you want to appeal, I think it is ludicrous that the RFU are spending our money, because it is our money as club members, our money on bloody QCs. I think the fact that they've written how many page report?
This is a 7-page report, but this is not. This is this report was not written by the.
You genuinely think that no player should turn up to a disciplinary hearing having been given a red on the field?
Yes, so
trying to make a case that it may not have been a red.
Exactly. So what I'm saying, right, is if the offence is within the laws of rugby and dealt with by the referee, you can come to the disciplinary and you can give your character reference, but you can't submit something from a QC. Now, if you're Sexton or if you're Denny Solomona, do you remember his gay slur against Shilcock?
Oh, yeah.
If you're accused of something which is kind of outside of the laws of the game, but within the rules of the competition, so you can't be abusive, or it's something that might require police intervention, or something a bit more serious, but a non-rugby, then by all means, I think a legal representative is reasonable. But for something on the field,
if World Rugby or Six Nations or whatever panel, if they've done their job in administering the game, so everyone understands what they're judging, it shouldn't matter who's presenting the evidence. So it's up to.
Well, if it shouldn't matter, why are we spending so much money?
Well, because he's obviously done a very good job.
So it does matter.
He's taken advantage of the fact that you're here running cover for the administration of the game not being good. You're saying don't get someone who's really good at making an argument in, because it will show up the fact that the administrators of the game aren't very good.
Well, I mean, you run that both ways, right? I mean, the administrators of the game are not good, right? But the reason they might not be good is because they don't know who's sitting on their panel. I mean, it doesn't sound like the panel are particular, or even worse.
Well, yeah, but that's the administration of the game not being good. They should know who's sitting on their panel. They should know. They should brief properly the people on their panel so they know they get consistency.
I mean, it's a simple game
of the laws,
right? You, me, and Phil, if we saw that video, could come to a conclusion: is that a red card or not? Without the intervention of a QC. And I think you have to make a decision on a red card based on your rugby knowledge and what you see. And there is no time to spend bloody union money when they can't afford, when there's 3 clubs bankrupt and whatnot. Right. They shouldn't be spending money on QCs.
Right. So if you're saying the RFU shouldn't be spending money on it because there's not enough money in the game. And
no, that's not the reason. They just shouldn't do it.
If you're arguing they shouldn't do it because they might show up the
no, that's not my argument either. My argument isn't we don't do this because the administration's poor.
I think it's taken us off into the weeds.
No, I think it's a vitally important point. It is a vitally important point that a decision has been made on the field for a red card. The red card has not just been potentially could have been made by the referee, but has gone to a secondary bunch of officials who now seem to be completely redundant. So that second process has now gone to a third process to assess if it's a red card, which somebody is then taking a QC to. Now, that is ludicrous by any stretch of the imagination. Having 3 separate processes running concurrently to work out if it's a red card, including a QC, is absolutely ludicrous.
I don't see that the QC's got any bearing on it.
You don't see...
No, I see the whole thing is ludicrous, but I don't think the fact that... I think the fact that you've got a ludicrous situation probably means that you do need a QC. If you got the initial decision and the subsequent decision right, no one needs a QC.
Yeah, but the QC, all he's done is he's manipulated the law so that people who are engaged with the game and know what to expect and the spirit of the law has now actually been removed. Now, I say this from a very, very strange point of view, which is I'm happy for the Owen Farrell standard of play to be the standard of play for everybody. Right? I'm fine with that contact. I'm fine with those hits, despite what a progressive rugby want. I'm fine with that. But we shouldn't have a situation where you can afford... I mean, what if you're... I don't know. You play for the Cook Islands, and then you get your 10-week ban. Can you afford a QC?
Well, we've seen bits of that in the past, haven't we?
Yeah.
With the one that always sticks in my mind is Alessandra Tuilagi, who got it was a long ban. It was 5 or 10 week ban.
Insane, that one,
for running, and I think it was a Japanese player dived too low. Tuilagi's knee hit the player whose head who dived too low, and he got the ban. Tuilagi got the ban, which that was insane. But that, I mean, that shows that highlights, that highlights that probably you do need a QC.
I could see an argument.
You're talking lowest common denominator stuff. You're saying if they can't have it, no one should have it.
No.
Whereas actually what you should say is it shouldn't matter whether a QC turns up or a player turns up and makes their own argument. The people know what the law is.
I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that point, Tim. I think that's a very fair point.
And there should be consistency irrelevant of all that
just
stuff.
don't...
And then, if that were the case, England wouldn't hire a QC because there would be no point. It would be a waste of money.
Yeah. So did this is what I'm not entirely sure about. Did this little convention come about, this committee come about, because it's a disciplinary after a red card that's automatic? It wasn't because of an appeal, was it?
No,
just the automatic process.
It's just an automatic.
Right, so if it's the automatic process, there's definitely not a need for a QC. Because the red card's being handed out, and then you just issue the ban. Now, if you want to appeal it, that's a different process.
Well, for the reasons we just said, there clearly is a need for a QC because the administration of the game is poor.
Yeah, the administration of the game is poor, but there was... So the appeal came in where Owen Farrell did not contest the fact that it was a high tackle, contact high, and he actually didn't contest that it should be a red card from the initial 3 questions. What he contested was that there should be mitigation, and that was what was upheld. So it was an appeal to reduce the red card down to yellow.
Right. So there's an appeal wrapped up automatically with the commission.
The defendant gets the opportunity to either accept in full or, as he's done, which is a partial acceptance. It's a yes, but...
It just blows my mind, this video of it. You know, it's not like a complex financial crime. Like, it's there. This must be the easiest money that QC has ever made.
Possibly. But it's on the need for a QC, I was going to save this for the end, but there is one of the most astonishing lines that I've ever heard, and a total condemnation of the point of the bunker, or the foul play review officer.
Yes, I think I know what you're about to say. Go on.
And indeed, I don't even know where we've got referees if this line is to be taken true.
I know exactly what I'm talking about.
The final sentence of the whole thing is where the panel, the SC, which is Australian Senior Council, I've just read, or State Council in some instances, and the 2 ex-players, the Aussie ex-players who are on the panel, they are defending the FPRO, defending the bunker, and saying that no criticism made of the FPRO, nor, in our opinion, would it be warranted. Unlike the FPRO, we had the luxury of time to deliberate and consider in private the incident and the proper application of the head contact process. In contrast, the FPRO was required to make his decision in a matter of minutes. Without the benefit of all the relevant material.
Or a QC.
Including, importantly, hearing from the player and his legal representative.
Thank you. That is my point.
But that shows that if your stance is that minutes and multiple angles of replays, maybe not all the angles, but multiple angles of replays, is insufficient to get the decision right, why on earth have we got a referee? What is is the referee, should he just have a magic 8 ball?
Well, more to the point, I mean, isn't it amazing for someone from the legal profession to be advocating that what is needed is more legal profession?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't believe that.
That is the standard.
It feels like we're going to get to a stand.
It's like when Steve Diamond went into, was it Edinburgh to do or was it Worcester to do a review, an urgent review of the coaching structure?
What was the outcome of that?
I think it was just one line. Hire Steve Diamond. He's
not wrong there. So in the future, I can always see it's being like, do you know when Osama bin Laden was killed? And the solicitors are on the phone, or the legal people are on the phone to the president all the time to make sure that the killing is legal. I can see in the future that we read the English first 15 and their legal representatives, and it'll be the strength of the legal team which will dictate if they're going to win this game. The things are nonsense.
Well, just on the mitigation point, what I'm curious about is, and this was kind of my understanding from trying to read it, but it's so opaque and hard to understand. My understanding was, as you've said, mitigation cannot be applied because of that, and I think that's odd because there's the kind of, as I said, I don't know what the right phrase would be, but double jeopardy or whatever. He couldn't have been in a legal position because of the thing that
the
was
dynamic
mitigating.
movement.
Anyway, what I understand is that means it cannot be applied. But I've had some people say to me, and some people that seem to know what they're talking about, going, no, you still can apply that even in. You still can apply that, and that will be a relevant factor in a further appeal discussion by World Rugby. And other people have said that the bar that World Rugby are going to have to pass to overturn this is going to be quite substantial and not a gimme.
Yeah. So on that, my understanding of the World Rugby. So World Rugby announced today, about lunchtime today. Which was when they released this full written decision, even though Six Nations had previously said they weren't going to release the written decision. So that they are going to exercise their right to appeal the disciplinary decision. Now, in that appeal, so there's Regulation 17 of World Rugby's regulations, which the only good explanation of it that I've seen was done by Rugby in the Law, who is, we mentioned before, and was the only probably voice that got the first decision correct. So he's saying that the appeal is not revisiting the evidence.
Yes.
They are testing the process that was followed. I used to sit on a panel of governors a few years ago, and we had to make decisions. We had to validate whether the decisions taken by the board of the NHS Trust, the board of the NHS Trust and the non-executive directors, not whether those decisions were right or wrong, but whether they'd followed the correct process in coming to those decisions.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting point, that, because people do think on appeal you just rerun the case, and you do not.
You do not. And I used to get so frustrated because some of the people around me would say, oh yes, I think this is the right decision, therefore I'm going to approve that the process was followed. Yeah. It's like, no, don't think whether it's a good or bad thing. Did they tick the boxes that they needed to tick?
Yes.
So that is what's happening. And the test for it is, was the decision in error? And in deciding whether it was in error, was it manifestly wrong, or whether it applied the wrong principles? So from that, Rugby in the Law, and I'd agree with this, is setting a high bar. That doesn't mean it's an impossible bar for them to overcome, and evidently World Rugby thinks there is a public interest, or there is a potential of this bar being overcome. But it's that whether it was manifestly wrong or applied the wrong principles. And there does seem to be the only So they don't explicitly address that principle that we talked about. Mitigation will not apply for intentional or always illegal act of foul play. They don't address it, save for one line where they say it was not always illegal. But in doing so, they never address that Owen Farrell's right arm was tucked. So that will be there is a small route in there that I can see for World Rugby to overturn it on that basis.
Do you not just think this is the inverse of what we've already seen? So what we've seen is a panel of people who have come to the wrong decision in accordance to how rugby is viewed by people engaged with the game. That's how I'd put it, right?
Well, no. I think you were more accurate when you said what people expected the outcome to be, because as you said, I don't necessarily agree with World Rugby's laws and all the different additional bits they've put in, but we made our decision when we were chatting about it on Sunday based on what we were expecting. So we all agree it's a red card according to the current process. I'm with you. I don't want necessarily the red cards to be as flowing and the high tackle stuff to be as prominent as it is. So I think we all agree on that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So presumably they're going to throw it over to another bunch of people who will just say, yeah, it is manifestly wrong, and there will be no appeal of the appeal. So why do they need to follow any process?
It's interesting. I reckon one question related to that, and sort of picking up on what Phil said as well, it's sort of in the same area, is, well, I'll ask one question. Do you think World Rugby would have done this were there not a big reaction online? Secondly, do you think they will come up with? Do you think do you think they may make sure by one way or another that they meet whatever high bar is necessary for the very same reason?
Yes, I think.
Point one. No, I don't think if this was another player in a different set of circumstances, I don't think there would have been. No. There wouldn't have been the reaction, and World Rugby would not be doing this.
Okay, I would say that the online reaction is 100% what plays to World Rugby. I had a good conversation about this on Twitter and Rugby the other day. You're very famous at the moment, Tim, saying it's not real life, and I could not agree less. It is real life to these people. The whole tackle framework and the high tackle debate is all formed on Twitter. You know, the outrage around high tackle is all formed around Twitter. We have got a bunch of absolute bandits in progressive rugby who've been on BBC 5 Live. They've been everywhere on the media this week because you only need a small amount of rabble-rousers on Twitter to get things changed. Look at Exeter Chiefs, one absolute lunatic in high heels managed to get rid of the Exeter branding.
So did you read, I sent the two of you, when we were having this debate about a month ago, I sent you a Nassim Nicholas Taleb article called The Dictatorship of the Small Minority.
Yes, yeah.
Which is great. Right. You were absolutely right. This is when JB corrected me and said it's not real life. You sent that article and it was really enlightening.
So that explains why. It kind of, to me, it kind of explains why you're both right. Because it's not real life, but it is what influences everything.
Yeah.
It's why, as Taleb says, why Europe will eat mostly halal. Because a handful of people, the threshold to doing it for a small number of people means it's easier to then.
It's like any bunch of lunatics. It's like the small band of Brexiteers, or the small band of Black Lives Matter, or the small band of MAGA Republicans. They're all the same people. They're all the same lunatics.
Yeah, you don't need to call them lunatics. You can just say they're a small group with a fringe opinion that they.
Okay, fringe opinion. Well, and they do overlap with lunatics. There is a correlation between lunatics.
They're entitled to that opinion,
and they're entitled to be lunatics too. We need lunatics, but I'm just saying that they do influence the conversation.
They massively. Yeah. So I completely agree with that point. That were it not for Twitter, if Twitter didn't, or X didn't exist, this wouldn't have gone. There would be no World Rugby appeal.
But here's the thing, right? Here's why it's a real big deal. Because Twitter does exist.
Yeah.
And it's because of Twitter and the pandering to Twitter and every single, trendy cause the RFU can get its hand on, which is why we're playing children's laws in the grassroots game. We're doing that to appease Twitter. And the RFU do an awful lot to appease Twitter. So, on the one hand, we can't sort of say, this is only Twitter's fault for Owen Farrell, because actually the whole landscape is pretty much social media driven now. The reason that the governing body has effectively abandoned the grassroots game and does not administer the game for the masses of people that want to play it, but instead for a very, very small minority of people, is because of Twitter. So when they come unstuck because of it, I don't really care. I think that they deserve it. I mean, the other allegation going around towards World Rugby is that they're racist, because George Moala got 10 weeks reduced to 5, which no one talks about, but it was reduced to 5. It isn't a 10-week ban. And, if the RFU and World Rugby like to latch onto trendy sort of topics such as, any discrepancy equals discrimination or some such thing, well, let's call them all racists. I'm all for it. Start the witch hunt.
I mean, the George Moala one, it does seem ludicrous.
It is ludicrous.
5-week ban, certainly a 10-week ban, but even a 5-week ban for that.
But he doesn't have a QC.
He doesn't. No. So he needs one.
Yep. Yeah, he does, actually.
He definitely... If he had access to Owen Farrell's QC, what was his name?
I know a QC who he definitely shouldn't hire.
Richard
Clark?
Smith.
No.
Richard Smith, KC. Sorry. Keep calling him QC.
Yeah, I keep calling him...
I know. KC. Then Moala would have got off if he free to play immediately, just like Faz. But the World Rugby, it will be... I mean... We were chatting on a WhatsApp group, rugby dedicated WhatsApp group before, and people were saying, this is so boring, like, we don't want the game to be like this. While I don't want the game to be like this, I do kind of love reading these reports and seeing
such a waste of time, isn't it? Like, such ink is wasted.
So I'm fascinated by how World Rugby try to clear up this mess, because one of the things that is definitively true is that a month before a World Cup, less than a month, 3 weeks before a World Cup, no one is talking about the positive things. And if we talk about the Scotland-France game, if the focus on the Scotland-France game from last weekend, there would be a lot of positive talk.
Yeah.
Instead, we are talking about the uselessness of the administrators, why people can't get it right, why the laws as applied are wrong or right, instead of the good stuff.
Well, it goes back to what I said at the start of the podcast, which is I suspect that these Australian committee members probably see the game through the lens of someone who played in the 90s.
Yeah,
and I kind of wanted... I'm all for that. And furthermore, I am upset about Farrell being able to play again. And I'm upset because, I just look at what the unions lecture the grassroots to do and how we're irresponsible with player welfare and how we're not taking it seriously and how we need to be educated. Meanwhile, Owen Farrell can play, and there's a clear disconnect between their own disciplinary process and what they're lecturing us to do. And that's what I hate. I hate the fact that they could find the political capital to sort of defend Owen Farrell. Certainly England could, but they couldn't find any capital to defend what we do on a weekend. They just, bent over and took it and said, yeah, we'll change the laws to satisfy fringe pressure groups. It's not to harp on about progressive rugby, but they put out a tweet this week, something like, England need to stop the corporate speak and stakeholder outreach and bare their teeth. Or no, World Rugby need to stop the corporate speak and stakeholder engagement and bare their teeth, show that they're serious on head injuries. I'm like, well, how do they do that? By extending their stakeholder outreach to people like Progressive Rugby, because that's exactly what they are. They're just a small stakeholder and pressure group. And that's who is modelling the game now. It's got nothing to do with us. It's got nothing to do with the people that play it.
Now, I am slightly disappointed, JB, that you've not mentioned a point that you made about a month ago.
Ooh.
When Johnny Sexton got his ban.
Low-level corruption.
Yes.
So
I'm surprised you're not celebrating this for... well, everyone's just turned a blind eye, nodded and winked. Faz gets to play. England captain gets off scot-free because of his position.
If England Rugby, kind of back to political capital, if England Rugby were to stand up tall and say, no, this is what our members decide to do with their weekend, we're going to fight tooth and nail to keep this game exactly the same, and we don't care what you say, I would back them to the hilt with their low-level corruption to get faster play. In fact, I'm all for it. I don't think that we should be building disciplinary processes which are not for the players and the people who participate in the game, but instead are for Sports England or whoever it is that requires them to have these sort of processes. So yeah, I'd be all for that. But the fact of the matter is that they let down the grassroots game, and I want them all to go in the most painful way possible, and I'll use any tool at my disposal, regardless of how insincere I am.
So, Johnny Sexton, have the IRFU done anything to benefit you then? Because you're saying you won't support the RFU because they've not benefited. So why did you support the IRFU?
Because as a fan, I quite want to see Johnny Sexton play. I know what my first principles are, which is where possible, I want to see players on the field, not off the field. I think I would look at
Owen Farrell.
No, I would quite like to see Owen Farrell play, but in this case, you've got a tool, you've got to use it. And for me, it's to attack World Rugby and the RFU relentlessly. I don't really apologise for that.
So yeah, I am fascinated to see exactly how World Rugby try and square this circle. What happens?
Oh, sorry, go on, Phil.
No, you go, Tim.
Go on, Tim.
No, I was just going to say on the actual. We talked about the reaction online. We talked about that a little bit. Did you see Andy Farrell today?
No,
I saw. Did he just criticise the circus, something along those lines?
Yeah, he was asked about it, and he was. I mean, that is a guy. He looked. It was one of those moments with Andy Farrell, and you get this where you think, "My God, you're hard." But he was very, very calm and measured, but you could kind of see in his eyes the passion that was burning. And he was asked about his thoughts on it, and he said, "Look, I can't really. Anything I say is flawed because you're asking a father about a son."
Yeah, I think that's a great answer,
and that's going to be flawed. He said, "I don't normally say anything, but what I will say is what did he say? He said the circus that has followed Owen this week has been an absolute disgrace." He said disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful, and then he said, "And the people who have enjoyed," what did he say? Enjoyed the sunlight are going to get to bask in it for a few more days.
Now that would be, I guess, the grifters like Progressive Rugby who've been everywhere. They even highlighted Tane Basham's head injury. Like they even go as far as to sort of hijack players' injury statuses to push a narrative. So I agree with that. I don't think anyone's been after Owen Farrell so much.
No,
there's been a tremendous amount of...
Yeah, they are.
Actually, yeah.
It's been very personal.
Well, what, like by nobodies on Twitter or by journalists? Because I think every journalist so far has been completely engrossed by the utter ridiculousness of the administration.
Yeah, nobody's
on
Twitter.
As we said, like you said, Twitter is
He's not
right.
on Twitter.
It wouldn't if it was just if it was just journalists criticising it and there was no reaction on social media, I think we probably agree World Rugby may have swerved this difficult thing, thinking, "Oh, it'll blow over, it'll go away." No. So I'm. Hey, look, I'm not. I'm only saying that it's been pretty ugly. The reaction, I mean, it's understandable. A lot of people have been saying, and I don't want to mischaracterise everybody. A lot of people have just been saying that's the wrong decision. Wasn't expecting that. That looks really dodgy. Absolutely
I think it is dodgy. I mean, I think it is dodgy.
Well, no, wait. So I was kind of there, but I just wanted to highlight that the personal stuff has been really quite ugly. And for all that people talk about, quote, rugby values, and for all that people talk about hashtag be kind and stuff like that, it's quite often...
Well, all I'll say is this.
There'll be a big Venn diagram overlap between people using the hashtag be kind and the people that were saying quite personal things.
Yeah, look, we all know who the absolute scumbags are, but they're also nobodies. And I'll just point out that, as someone who is engaged with the game as much as I am, or was at least, I have like one Twitter account now, which is the EggChasers, which I pop on and pop off. I don't really notice anything. Like, I've not picked up on any of the social media stuff because it's not worthless. It's created this situation. But I think in the case of Owen Farrell, I don't think he's reading like
no
Billy 567. I just don't think he. I can see why people.
I don't think Tim is concerned for Owen Farrell.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're just some idiot.
They are just idiots. But
you can't
exactly
as you say it is real. You can't say it is real life and then sort of go. It doesn't matter.
Exactly as you say, those idiots do influence what's going to happen.
It depends, doesn't it? Like, so the vast swathe of idiots don't do anything. But, like, when you get an organised campaign on Twitter, like Progressive Rugby or, like, anything else, then that's a different thing, isn't it?
I'm picking up you have an issue with Progressive Rugby, JB.
I hate them. I absolutely loathe them. They are in it to destroy our sport, and they're in it to destroy our sport and extract money from it. And if you think there's anything else, you are sadly mistaken. It's same with Alison Pollock, same with... Dr. White, same with all of the concussion grifters. This is what they're after. They are pathologically against the actual concept of the game.
Now, some of the takes that I have seen on Twitter, and I think these are ones that influences a lot of people saying World Rugby clearly don't care about head injuries, and that's across the board. Now, that to me just is a misunderstanding or miscategorization of what's going on, because World Rugby. Oh, it's not even World Rugby. The outcome of this process, if it were to stop at this disciplinary panel report, they're still saying this is a yellow card and 10 minutes. Yeah.
They're
not saying that this is a good thing and Owen Farrell should be free
It's open season on headshots now. Yeah. Just go and hit anyone in the head.
That is if that's your takeaway, and it is a lot of people's takeaway, people are actually stating things like that. You just don't understand what has happened here. It's still
Well, look, the reason that's happening is because it's such an effective tactic. So that's exactly the sort of thing which I'd be propagating right now. Which you just take the worst of your enemy and you really like, lay it on thick. But yeah, that isn't the case. I think what I really hate, I hate to sort of let World Rugby or the Union off through it with anything really. But the idea that it is open season, or the idea that... And they play into this as well, don't they? It's their own stupid fault, because they're so thick that they come up with things like, player safety is our number one priority. Well, it can't be. It simply can't be. You should not be in charge of the game if that is your stance, because there will not be a game. By definition, the safest game of rugby, as Phil, you've often said, is the game of rugby that isn't played.
Yeah, the old economist thing. If you don't want to injure people in construction... Don't build
How thick are these people? They must have an IQ of 12 to say that, because they're feeding all of these pressure groups.
Their headline.
Here you go.
Literally their headline.
Yeah. Attack us with this thing which we're going to give you. It's so thick. There's no other word for it. It is completely true that you can be 100% for playing the game and also very concerned about head injuries, and everyone is on that spectrum. Some people are more concerned about head injuries, some people are less concerned. But if your number one concern is not looking after the game first and foremost, you shouldn't be involved. And if your number one concern is player safety, then you shouldn't be involved in administering the game. Become a pressure
physical,
group.
Violent game.
Yes, exactly right. And it's so wrong, isn't it, when people say, "Oh, it's open season on head injuries," or they're not taking it seriously. They take it incredibly seriously. I hate to make the argument for the unions and for people that administer the game, but some people who administer the game, at least, have played. They do know people that play. I don't want my friends to have life-changing concussions, and the reason I'm not bothered about it is because it doesn't often happen that much, frankly. Particularly in the grassroots game, nobody takes it lightly, but we know the risks when we go in.
Certainly at amateur levels, the risk, as we've talked about many times, the risk has lowered because the game has never been safer. The medical awareness,
exactly. The safer we make it, the less tolerated the remaining risk.
Here's another mischaracterisation. Then, I almost feel the need to clarify this at every bloody caveat, because people just hear this and then they think I'm not. So, exactly as you've just pointed out, you can't hold two opinions. Owen Farrell, on balance, probably deserved a red card for this.
Yes,
and therefore will probably get this rescinding of the red card overturned. We'll probably get a ban, and that is, I'm okay with that. I think the way it's been handled is dreadful, but I'm okay with that. The mischaracterisation as well, that this is a major problem. I mean, it's kind of what you said, JB, about Owen Farrell. He does it all the time, quote unquote.
So let me ask you this, Tim. Does it change your opinion if I was to tell you that Anthony Watson, Dan Robson, Charlie Atkinson have all been knocked out by Owen Farrell's high tackles? Does that change your opinion?
Would it change your opinion?
If they hadn't, yes.
No, would it change your opinion if Dan Bigger has had 30% more yellow cards and fractionally more red cards per minute than Owen Farrell in his career?
Maybe. I don't know really. But I mean,
would it change your opinion if Andre Esterhazen has had 3 times as many red cards per minute as Owen Farrell in their careers?
No, not overly.
Would you have guessed those numbers?
Yeah, probably. I mean, yeah,
you would
probably.
have guessed that Dan Bigger had more yellow and red cards, and
definitely yellow cards. I mean, Owen Farrell is not a quote unquote. Well, is he? He's a very, very angry player. He's not necessarily a dirty player, but he does get these tackles wrong. He does get them wrong.
Tackles wrong. Yeah,
and, I've just named 3 guys there who, in the domestic league, who've been knocked out by him. Like actually knocked out. That is rare, isn't it?
He has a technique issue. He has a technique issue which very, very rarely rears its head. And he's obviously tried and has been unsuccessful in trying to sort it. We've speculated that we think he may have some sort of underlying shoulder injury which subconsciously kind of affects the way he braces for tackles and things like that.
Yeah, but Charlie Atkinson wasn't that. He approached him from behind.
I don't know. All I'm challenging is the perception that this happens all the time. Those are 3 players that I can just... It's not. And the one of the ones which you brought up at the weekend, which quite often gets brought up, Andre Esterhazen, the actual outcry from that was that it wasn't a penalty.
It's ridiculous.
It wasn't a red card, because it wasn't a red card. Even by today's laws, it wasn't a red card. Owen Farrell tackled the ball. It was probably high, probably a penalty, and South Africa should have had the penalty and won the game.
But again,
that's why it became a story.
He had his arm tucked. And that's the difference. So
yes, it was a penalty. It was a penalty, maybe a yellow card. But I'm not trying to go. I'm not trying to. I'm just challenging the perception.
No, but and I'd say that the perception is based on the fact that there's 3 England teammates there he's actually knocked out cold, plus Esterhazen, plus Basham, and there are other instances.
Esterhazen wasn't knocked out cold.
No, that's why I said plus Esterhazen plus Basham.
No,
so
Esterhazen was not a red card.
No. So you had the 3 knockouts.
Yeah,
and then you've had, on the international stage you've had the 2 prominent incidents of Basham and also Esterhazen, both of which I think are red cards.
A likely red.
I'd say the Esterhazen still today isn't a red card.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, I agree. Today's law, no, it's not, mate. He tackled the ball.
I think he hits the ball. I've watched it again recently. He hits the ball, and on that one, there's far more of an attempt to wrap. The reason he doesn't wrap is because of the impact on the impact on the ball.
But I watched
Esterhazen flies, and Owen Farrell flies backwards because Owen Farrell is actually wrapping his arm. So on that one, I don't even see
it again. But I watched it on Monday.
The controversy there was because South Africa didn't win the game.
Yeah,
the controversy there was because South Africa didn't win the game, not because Owen Farrell should have got a red card.
Yeah, but it also does still highlight the fact that he does have a tackle problem. And he does.
That one might be a legal tackle, Esterhazen.
That's not a legal tackle.
That may well have been a legal tackle. Anyway, it was marginal.
Angus Gardner, a few weeks after that, we were interviewing him in Monaco because he'd won Referee of the Year.
Well, look, I'm strictly over the opinion, right? If the referee says it's a legal tackle, it's a legal tackle. So if that's the standard you want to play, I'm down with that. I am 100% down with that. So
okay, well, all I was doing was just challenging the perception. It was Tom Chapman that sent in those stats about it, and some people would respond and go, yeah, but the only reason Owen Farrell's stats are like that is because he always makes these tackles, but because he's Owen Farrell doesn't get the cards.
I don't know. I just can't think of anyone else who's knocked out so many England teammates.
There's got to be some advantage to being England captain, like Richie McCaw never got pinged for hands in.
Yep,
you make a good point.
That is true.
Low-level corruption, now, as you always say, JB.
There is one other point, and we kind of touched on it, but there have been things that have happened this week, and this is the real shame of the Owen Farrell thing. So Scotland have announced their squad.
I've got just a point to make on the Scotland's announcing their squad.
And Khaleesi, who is, by some measure, one of the most iconic rugby players of this generation of players, some might argue, is returning to play. Now, these should be massive rugby stories. This is what...
Ntamak out injured.
Sorry?
Ntamak injured.
Yeah.
And it does make me feel a little bit like this is the... maybe this is unfair, but I am aware of the World Cup coming up. I know you two are. How many people are actually aware of the World Cup coming up who'd watch it, but the news just isn't filtering through? So this Owen Farrell thing has just absolutely dominated everything. Partly it's because it's Owen Farrell, partly because of the controversy around the character, but mostly because of the administration.
One complaint. So I agree with all that. One complaint. I'm going to do a bit of an Eddie Jones now. Complaint about how BBC announced the Scotland World Cup squad. What do you think? What do you think the headline would be? Scotland's best chance of World Cup glory. Fantastic depth in every position in the Scotland squad.
Thin Scotland squad.
How many foreign-born players are in the squad?
No, not even that. Instead of celebrating the talent, their amazing 2 games against France, the tries that could be scored from Darcy Graham and Cal Steyn.
Threadbare, miserable Northerners pick a few South Africans.
Is it about the let's say, because they had a few scrum halves and a few hookers, is it about a couple of the players that missed out?
The headline was, and it was a picture of someone who's not even in the squad. The headline
Chris Patterson
was, McNally misses out on Scotland World Cup
McNally
squad. So instead of celebrating all of the talent and all the brilliant stuff, it was... That's, if you see it's a JB here, picture of Stuart McAnally and him missing out on Scotland World Cup squad, which is just such a negative. Like, this is Eddie's point.
Yeah,
such a negative frame. I mean,
the
to
Scotland
look at
squad
it through.
is so exciting.
The Scotland squad is absolute dynamite. It's absolutely dynamite.
Can I just compound what you're saying? Just back up what you're saying, Phil. So I was listening to the BBC. I'm not going to mention the journalists because they're a peer, and it just feels I'm just not going to go in, not going to name them. You can work it out. But there was someone who was talking on BBC Radio 5 Live, their rugby program, about the. Actually, what does it matter? Actually, because it doesn't matter, because it's fine. They're brilliant at what they do. Sonia McLaughlin said was talking about the France-Scotland game and describing a Finn Russell pass, which was beautifully executed and led to an amazing try. Said, basically, the thing about Finn Russell is, if that pass had been a yard further, a fraction of a second slower, it would have been an interception and France would have scored. Yes, but it was perfectly executed.
Yes, this is on par, isn't it, with Owen Farrell's kicking? These kicks would have been deadly if Lee Halfpenny hadn't read them all. Well, yes, I mean, they would have been. I mean, they'd be great, wouldn't they? They'd be great. And the whole point of Finn Russell, I mean, the whole point of Carlos Spencer is that he would do things which nearly didn't work. If they 100% work, you've probably not taken enough risk.
Incredible.
But yeah, that Scotland squad is dynamite. I love it. Really excited for that first game against South Africa.
I think I am so much more positive. I said this on Sunday. I was convinced that Scotland had no chance. Now, I think they are going to be one of South Africa or Ireland, and then it'll come down to the kind of round robin and points difference.
Imagine they take Ireland.
They could take Ireland. In two of Scotland, Ireland, South Africa, France, New Zealand. Sorry, only 2 of those. 3 of those are not making it past the quarter-final. Only 2 of those can possibly, 2 of those 5 teams, and they're probably the best 5 teams in the world right now.
They are. Well, rankings, they're 1 to 5.
Oh, yeah, there you go then.
I definitely
sometimes, occasionally, rankings don't quite catch up with reality because of the lag and all the rest of it. But they are. Therefore, they are ranked the best 5, and they are the best 5 teams, and 3 of them can't get out of the quarterfinals.
I love France. I love South Africa. I want those 2 to progress.
I want Ireland and New Zealand.
Why?
Because I like them. But I'd also
I want France. I want France and New Zealand, because if England can't win a World Cup, I want a new winner of the World Cup.
France and Scotland then, or France and Ireland.
France and Scotland, or France and Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah, your choice, Phil, is so mundane.
I would love to see
the processed sugar choice.
2 good teams playing the right way, but I'd
playing the right way.
Actually, I'd love to see
really
Ireland and Scotland.
I would love
Scotland
for 4 Northern Hemisphere teams.
That would be quite good fun
in the semi-finals.
There is no chance of that happening.
No, there's
zero,
no chance.
Zero, unless it's Japan, Georgia, Italy, and Scotland.
Ireland, France, England, Wales could happen.
Yeah,
well, France and Ireland could do it.
France and Ireland could.
And so you need England and Wales.
England and Wales. It's actually, they've got the easier route to do it. to get to the semis.
So maybe. I mean, that would be amazing to see. Amazing. Oh, that's what I was going to say, talking about press conferences. Did you catch what Kevin said about Owen Farrell?
No, I didn't.
Should have read the notes coming at the press conference. I thought, I mean, everyone loves Kevin Sinfield, can do no wrong for obvious reasons. Obviously, don't need to go into that. But his press conference was bizarre. So somebody asked him something along the lines, and you need to pull up the quotes because they are bizarre, about does Owen Farrell have a disciplinary issue? And his answer was, well, that would be for you guys to decide. You're the ones that write the story. Like, that is a ludicrous thing to say from a defence coach. And
he's not the head coach, though, is he?
He's a defence coach.
Yeah, I know, but he's not.
Yeah, but be honest. Either say I'm not answering that, but don't.
Yeah.
Don't come up with that.
Maybe you should have said. Well, he kind of did say that's. I'm not going to answer that by going. That's for you. You make up your mind. But yeah.
No. But the implication was this isn't Owen's fault. You're the fault by saying these things. If you didn't say it, then it wouldn't be true.
You know what he was doing. You know he was just dodging the question. Wasn't giving them a quote.
Well, read the other quotes because they came out to bat for Owen Farrell. Quite vigorously, and I kind of appreciate that. But I think there is a way to do it, and it's not by saying you're the problem. The way is by saying, yeah, he plays on the edge, and we completely back him, and that's just the price you pay. But it's not your fault.
Well, if he had said that, then
he did say that.
Well, no, but if he had said in response to the question about his discipline issue, he plays on the edge, and we totally back him, then the story would have been England management don't care
about head injuries,
and
then they'd issue a statement saying our number one concern is player welfare, and then
just not the Welsh teams.
Yes, exactly.
And going back to Eddie Jones at the start, this is why whether you agree or disagree with what he says at times, he's a breath of fresh air because he doesn't. He just kind of says it.
Yeah, I always felt that the breath of fresh air with Eddie Jones was when he was cowering in front of 3 Scotland fans at Manchester Station. But he wasn't quite so mouthy then, was he? He's very mouthy around journalists, but he wasn't mouthy at all around the Scotland fans.
It's not often that journalists carry knives.
They were Scotland football fans.
Yeah. No, they weren't. They were coming up from...
They were rugby fans, were they?
They were rugby fans coming up from Twickenham, weren't they?
I don't know.
Never, yeah, wasn't quite so bolshy for some reason.
There you go.
Actually, talking of Scottish people on trains, do you remember the epic travails of Ryan Wilson when he had to get home? I'm trying to think of where it is from. Ryan Wilson had to get home from somewhere, and it was either London or somewhere else, and it was like a legitimate thing, like after a game or something. It took him 3 days to get back.
What?
Yeah, I can't remember what it was though. Anyway, doesn't really
You sure you're not talking about him when he was out? There was some. I seem to remember. Oh no, that was Northampton lock getting back from Claremont. I can't remember his name.
Ooh, recently.
Yeah. It's a great story. The one of the Northampton locks, can't remember his name. The big one, the biggest of the Northampton locks, not Ribbons. Obviously, he's at Toulon.
Moon?
But anyway, might be Moon.
The guy who went to London Irish.
Yeah, Moon. Anyway, Moon. He was on the piss after a game in Claremont. And ended up at Patheli Yato's house, and they missed him and a couple of other New Zealanders. I think it might have been Ratuni Urawa.
Yeah.
A couple of others. Anyway, they missed the flight home, and it was just an unbelievable. Just the story. I won't do it justice, but the story of the days it took them to get back.
So didn't Moon win the? They've got a trophy at Northampton, and it's what is that trophy when they've got to run up and down a hill?
Oh, it was the Mobs.
No, the Mobs is a match, isn't it?
Oh yeah, you're right. No, they do it as a pre-season thing. I can't.
Yeah,
remember.
there's a carry of some
after some military person. They have to do a long run and then they carry a sandbag.
Yeah. Well, Moon won it.
Blackiston.
That's it.
That's the one.
Do you know who won it this year?
I do.
Do you know, Tim?
I saw the video and I can't remember.
Young fly half.
Oh, Finn Smith.
Finn Smith won it. Yeah, nice.
No, the guy that played, there was a lock blindside who played for England, won it last year.
Lock.
That's not Moon. That's
Tamana Harrison.
No. He was a lock. Played for
not Coles.
Alex Coles won it last year.
How have they got so many locks and like so little impact on the field? Ribbons, Coles, Moon, Laws. Where are these guys?
I'm just trying to find who's won it. Dan Bigger's won it previously. Ruben Bird-Tulloch, Piers Francis, and 2-time victor Alex Coles.
Wow, it seems to somehow benefit the playmakers.
Yeah, because there's a big run in it, isn't there? So if you're 120 kg, it's often not. So you do complete 2.5 kilometre runs either side of a further 2 kilometre mile of 30 kg and 50 kg sandbag carries.
They need to get it better for the bigger fellas. They need to include one much bigger sandbag.
Yes,
so
I
for
agree.
a short distance, one that maybe even Dan Bigger might not potentially be able to lift.
I did a 12 kilogram carry for a mile, and that was hard enough.
12. Okay, yeah.
Big bloody ball. Hey, anyway, enough of that. So I think we've done it, Owen Farrell. So successful round. What do we think is going to happen next?
I'm not sure. It depends how much freedom they have to challenge, because how to challenge the fact that they don't address that right arm.
I'm sure this will be a kangaroo court, and they'll just say, yeah, guilty. And there'll be I'm sure there's no mechanism to appeal the appeal. Unless they go to like, the Court of Sports arbitration or something.
Yeah, there probably won't be. World Rugby would be the ultimate unless you go outside the game.
Yeah.
But
they'll know what the kickoff's going to be. I'd imagine social media again, if it's appeal heard, the original decision stands.
I can see.
Will go bananas again.
I can see that. I can see that happening. But then, if they do that, they've got to. The only way you're going to appease it is you've got to release the additional angles that show the drop in height and somehow explain why that right arm tuck does not make him always illegal. So on the basis of that, I think the right arm tuck makes him always illegal. Therefore, I suspect the World Rugby appeal will be upheld.
And will they... whereas before, if they'd come out with a 3-game ban, let's say, that meant he just missed the Argentina game, then I think everyone would have gone, all right, okay. And next story, let's talk about the Scotland squad. Let's talk about the Ireland team against England. But I don't think they're going to be able to do anything like that. I think they're going to have to go minimum 6 games, and which will be more than George Mawala's ban, obviously, because he's got halved. But that's where I probably think they're going to get to. I'd like to think they might. Might go.
Yeah, we're not going to go 12 and halve it to 6, are they?
No. So it'll be. I think the midpoint was 6, so I'm hopeful they might go 3, including Ireland, which obviously the appeal is going to happen.
And it's so hard for World Rugby because all they do is harp on about changing behaviours and perception, this Orwellian language, thinking that if they just are harsh enough, things will change. I think it's just abandon the whole thing and let people play actual rugby to a decent height.
The other thing I would say, and you can't do this now, but I would be up for this in the future, and some people will complain, but I think this is one of those times where you just say don't care what you complain as much as you want, it's not going to change, and people will stop bleating about it. But if you said next World Cup, no previous disciplinary issues are going to be carried into a World Cup.
I'm so glad you said that, because I wanted to mention this and I forgot. I think World Cups should be beyond the purview of... I mean, there should be some bans which are permanent. So, if you have a ban for gouging, I don't see you coming back.
Mm-hmm. Swearing at a ref?
No, I think you come back for that.
Hitting a ref.
Hitting a ref, though? No.
Yeah.
A physical intimidation of a ref? Absolutely not. I don't mind the odd...
Gambling?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely gambling. Yeah, things that will get you banned from the sport.
Being, we'd think of a list and it'd be outside of a certain ethic or moral or framework.
Yeah, so if you're banned from
outside of that, fair play.
Anything which will ban you from the sport rather than ban you for games will count towards a World Cup. If it's just banning for games, like, high shot or something, then you can play in the World Cup. It's just, we talk about player welfare in such one-sided terms. Because what about the welfare of the player who's retired but doesn't have, the World Cup experience because of your disciplinary process? I just don't think it's right. It's such a fleeting career. And just to take opportunities away from lads because you want to be seen to change perception to appease a handful of fringe lunatics, it just doesn't wash with me. I think that the World Cup, like you say, Tim, it should almost be like, yeah, everything's clear and you play. But if you get caught in a World Cup doing something, then you should be banned for the rest of the World Cup.
Within the World Cup, yeah.
Yeah, it's a standalone thing.
Or the normal framework supply within the World Cup. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah,
or you could even do it like, that's fine. Let's not go any deeper than that. Yeah, that would just be... you can't do that now, but that would be the case for George Moala, who... or Owen Farrell, or Johnny Sexton, or whoever else.
Well, football, don't they have a COD amnesty for the semi-finals?
Yeah. For the knockout.
Yeah, there's often within tournaments like in Champions League, I think, there's a round where cards get cleared.
I think that's a great
idea. Not sure which round, but yeah, you're right, they do.
So it's not like it's not been done before.
There we go. We have done, on a Thursday night, we've done
1 hour and 10 minutes of Owen Farrell.
More than we should have done. And 2 minutes of Eddie Jones as well.
Yeah, bloody hell. Farrell and Jones still dominating the airwaves.
And the Blackiston Challenge.
Yes, the Blackiston Challenge. Yes, thank God we covered that. Because sometimes things like that slip through the net and we can't have that happen.
Exactly. Frankly, for my liking, not enough Sam Burgess and Stuart Lancaster. But we will undoubtedly correct that on Sunday.
Yeah, correct. What was that noise? Do you hear that?
It might have just been me tapping the arm of the sofa.
Right, so in that case, we are done. If you want to disagree with us vigorously, don't bother on social media because we won't answer you. But you can get hold of us on Gmail, which people have done in record numbers. Our inbox is absolutely rammed. So if you want to continue ramming our inbox, please do. Contact eggchasers@gmail.com. We do read everything, and we keep meaning to mention as many things as... In fact, if you've got time on Sunday, Tim, that is your job.
Yeah, I'll do that.
And we've got mission statements from the RFU, which we need to read, and we've got some phenomenal emails. Like, the amount of effort that goes into some of these emails, they're absolutely incredible. So
you're right.
Keep them coming.
It's not lost on us.
No. Right, so from me, Tim and Phil, let the boys play. Well, within the laws of the game.
Yes, and as long as you've got your legal representative alongside you.
Let the legal representatives play.
Yes.
Let the KCs play.